Hello and welcome back to the African Diaspora Experience, Living Narratives from Greenberg. I am Tina P. Dinkins, representing the Department of Community Resources, and our guest today is Mr. James Jackson Biff Henderson.
Junior.
Junior. I left out I remembered the Jackson and the Junior.
That's quite all right.
Lovingly known here in Greenberg as Biff Henderson. So I have to ask you, how did you become known as Biff?
Oh, interesting. My life's journey started in the 1940s, in Durham, North Carolina.
Yes.
Jim Crow segregated South. I have one sister that's older than I am by 5 or 6 years, but a friend of my mother's had a dream that she had a kid named Biff. So it's not a showbiz thing, it's an actual nickname that was given to me when I was born. My mother promised her that when if she had another kid, that she would nickname the kid Biff, boy or girl. And that's me.
And she stuck to it. What a great friend.
Right.
So you grew up in Durham, North Carolina, segregated Jim Crow South, you said?
Absolutely.
As a young black male, what was that like growing up in the segregated South?
Separate but equal is what they called it.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, it was basically true. In Durham, it was not like living in the country or in the suburbs or someplace outside of a major city. And Durham was definitely progressive, and a city of maybe 40,000 people at the time, the third or fourth largest city in the state of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And growing up there, in my situation, I'm very humbled about it and blessed because I was brought up in basically a very upper middle class environment. My parents did very well for themselves. Durham actually was progressive for blacks, and they had, everything was basically available. The largest black-owned and operated business in the world.
Yes, I know.
At that time was
North
located
Carolina Mutual
Life Insurance Company, and it was also bank, Mechanics and Farmers Bank, Mutual Savings and Loan, many businesses. And the separate but equal part of this is there was one major high school for blacks and one major high school for whites. My high school was Hillside. Durham High was for whites. Then in the county, they had 2 or 3 county schools that basically went from 1st to 12th grade. And Northern and Southern High for whites. They had Merritt Moore, and Merritt Moore was named after 2 of the founders of North Carolina Mutual, yep. Aaron Moore and John Merritt, and along with C.C. Spaulding. And having said that, every school that I attended in Durham, from elementary school straight through high school, was named after someone black, okay? Oh. It was a Booker T. Washington, and like that, it was usually somebody local. Okay. Like W.G. Pearson. In the 5th grade, I went to C.C. Spaulding Elementary School, was another one of the founders of North Carolina Mutual and the banks. And that went straight through high school. So, it was separate equal. I mean, there was one major hotel for whites, one for blacks, and 3 theaters each, including one drive-in theater. Blacks could go to the white theaters, had to go up in the balcony, which were the best seats in the theater anyway. They really were. And, we had fun with them, throwing popcorn down there on them.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, you name it, hey, whatever. I mean, they were the best seats. And they could come over to our theaters, but they had to sit over there. I mean, it was definitely separate. And it was weird because I grew up in an environment that was totally, you were aware of everything and expected, a lot was expected of you, regardless of your social or economic background, with have and have-nots. People were unified to a degree. I'm speaking of Durham, okay, that, everything was, there and available and exposed to whoever.
So you were still held to the highest standard?
Yes, and not
Yeah.
because of my parents, but because that was Durham.
That was the community.
That was the way it was. And, you know, it's a black college in Durham, North Carolina College, and all that, you know, so that's the way it was. I mean, you know, in elementary school, it started around 8:30 in the morning, 9 o'clock, we would meet in the auditorium of the school, and we would pledge allegiance to the flag and sing the black national anthem, lift every
Oh,
voice,
wow.
and lift every voice and sing. That was every day.
And
you
this
know.
is in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And probably before I started. And having said that, you know, so I know the entire song, all four verses, where as I got older and met other people, for some reason they
didn't.
they,
Yeah.
they didn't realize it.
Well,
either.
yeah, I mean, when you talk about the segregated South, you had, in many ways, a very privileged upbringing, because many people didn't experience separate but equal as actually separate and equal.
Well, I can't honestly say if it was equal.
Right.
I know everything, the numbers were equal,
Okay.
but I had nothing to compare it to.
Did you hang out with other white teens? Did you have
I
white
never knew
friends, or
any.
you never knew? Wow.
Never
so
knew
it
any.
really
No
was
reason to.
separate, right?
Yeah, no reason to. I mean, you know, I think guys used to come across and want to compete in maybe some sports and everything, and they would never win because we couldn't allow that to happen. Just that simple. I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah.
I don't recall, you know. But
So
we had boys clubs, YMCAs, everything that you can imagine. There were black supermarkets. I mean, you name it, drugstores, and definitely churches. You know,
Yes.
that type of thing. You know, I mentioned to a lot of people that I grew up in a city where there was actually a boys club. They said, "You had a boys club?" You know, I said, "Yep, John Avery Boys Club."
For young black males.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was actually named after a black person. you know, and so the identity in the relationship was there. You know, I never felt. I knew segregation was there. I knew Jim Crow existed, but that was, you know, it was that's the way it was.
I heard that one of your childhood friends was the very, very famous Arthur Ashe.
Oh yes.
How did you meet Arthur Ashe? Was that high school, elementary school?
Well, we actually, I played tennis.
Okay.
Growing up, I was a pretty serious tennis player, and at that time down in Durham, blacks had actual tennis clubs. I mean, I'm not talking about a group of people meeting in a park.
Right.
I'm talking a building.
Whole tennis club.
Yeah,
Wow.
an actual tennis club. And at that time, there was the ATA, which was the American Tennis Association, which was basically black, and the USLTA, which was the United States Lawn Tennis Association, which was white. When I was coming along, Althea Gibson sort of had already broken the
Another Olympian. Yep.
color line. There were a lot of tournaments all over the country. The ATA was a really big deal. I mean, we'd go to tournaments and there were a lot of entries. But Ash, what happened, there was a lady in Durham named Mrs. B.A.J. Whitted, and she was very active in the community. She worked for North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company as the treasurer, and she was big into tennis, and from what I understand, very instrumental in Althea's career, along with a man named Dr. Hubert Eaton from Wilmington, North Carolina. At any rate, I was like about 5, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I was playing, and Mrs. Whitted called my parents and asked if this young man from Richmond could stay at our house, and he was competing in a tournament. And yes, and my parents said yeah, and it was Ash, and so we became friends that way. And he was a little ahead of his time in the game and in other things, very bright guy. And I won my first trophy with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And what happened was we were sitting around the dinner table, and Ash said that he wanted to play doubles in the tournament, but he didn't have a partner. So my parents said, well, why don't you take Biff? And if he was still living, he may be a year older than I am, okay? So the 3 divisions in the ATA were the 12 and under year olds, 13 to 15, and 15 to 18. And we were in the 12 and under. And he said, oh, I'll do that. And so I won my first trophy. He won the first trophy. I was just his partner. Okay. He actually won the trophy.
That's incredible.
Yeah, he was that good. And then we remained friends all the way up until his death, actually.
Yeah. So what was it like watching him soar and become who he became in the
Yeah,
tennis world?
I mean, it was expected. I mean, there were a lot of good black tennis players out there, but, you know, his story is his story. And it's fair. I mean, he was ready for that.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't an easy task, but he succeeded at that. And I think he would have succeeded at anything that he did.
He's just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Kind of like someone else we know. You went to one of the greatest historically black colleges in the country, Hampton University, my alma mater.
I wonder why you say it was so good.
What guided you to Hampton, Virginia? What guided you to that particular school? Because it sounds like you were incredibly bright, very well involved. Yes, I'm listening to you. You won a trophy with Arthur Ashe. What made you pick Hampton University to continue your education?
It wasn't much of a choice. I mean, it was a choice I had. I mean, my father, everybody in my family attended Hampton, just about.
Family tradition.
Yeah, undergrad. Okay. My father actually was the first black member of the trustee board at Hampton.
Wow.
And he was the first black chairman of the trustee board at Hampton. My sister had attended Hampton, other relatives, and so I went after high school to pre-college at Hampton. And I actually didn't attend my freshman year. I went to Tennessee State under a tennis offer because they were trying to get a tennis program going. And I went out there, and I enjoyed it. I had an uncle who was working at Fisk, teaching at Fisk, who eventually became a president at Clark College in Atlanta. But anyway, I transferred back to Hampton at the end of my freshman year at Tennessee State. And I'd gone to pre-college the year before, and that was the summer. Well, that was the summer of '63. I had been involved very heavily in the civil rights movement, protesting down south. So I'd gone to the March on Washington in '63.
Okay.
And then I went back to Hampton, and when I got there, the tennis coach wanted me to come out for the team, and I did. I went out for a few days, and I just had hit a wall. I'd played too much, and so I dropped it for quite a few years. But how I was convinced to go to Hampton, it was like one of those things that, to a degree, I guess you could say family tradition, but also I kind of grew up on the campus.
Yeah.
So having said that, you know,
it's a very natural decision.
Yeah, you know, people said to me, you know, your legacy with Hampton, you know, this, that, and the other, and it's a good school, conducive for studying, make friends for life, and a lot of good stuff.
All that is true. You are actually one of the reasons I chose to go to Hampton University. Yes, you and Ted Jones. Yes, of course.
Well, I'm sure you don't regret it, I hope.
I do not. Never will.
They just didn't tell me about all the fun we were on.
It was that too. Yeah, we learned a lot. It was a lot of fun.
It was.
So you grew up in the segregated South, and then went to an HBCU, and then you served in Vietnam. Thank you for your service.
I was drafted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Vietnam was.
But you're welcome.
Vietnam was the first war, I believe, where black troops and white troops were not segregated.
Maybe I'm learning something I didn't know.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, because you talked very much about growing up very separate, and HBCUs are historically black colleges and universities. So when you were deployed and were serving in Vietnam, I would imagine you were less separate from white people than you had been in your earlier life.
Let's back up for a second here. Let's understand something. Another reason I may have gone to Hampton, probably did. See, I was never in a classroom with anyone white, and never had a white instructor all the way through college.
Right.
Okay? I was never in the minority.
Right.
Basically. Okay? So when they were talking about things like entitlement and everything, I thought they were talking about me.
Right.
I didn't realize that
That you were a minority, right?
I mean, I knew I knew I was being discriminated against, but I was, I had never been in everything that I had experienced to that point and beyond was made sure that it happened. Teachers always were looking out for everybody, everything. I mean, if something happened in Durham, for instance, there were black detectives, black police officers and everything, and if you did anything, if anything happened, your parents knew about it before you got home, and that's not a joke. I mean, they really did. They, go get your own switch, whatever you want, having said that, I just wasn't in that situation, if that was the question.
Well, it's a different experience. So when you get to Vietnam,
Vietnam,
are you fighting alongside white soldiers? And
yeah.
So this is the first time. Is this the first time, would you say, in your life that you weren't separate from?
Well, no. I at that point, yes, I had met a few white friends.
Okay.
And so I knew some people, but to that degree, yeah, probably. People that I felt I could trust.
Okay.
And I felt comfortable around. Vietnam was a different experience. I was drafted in 1968, and it was a situation where that was during the Tet Offensive, which was, they say, was the worst time. I was an older guy. I'd been to college. I was 21, 22. Most of the guys over there were 18, 19. I mean, I learned things that I did not need to know and wish I didn't know to some degree. I'm glad, and in other ways, I'm glad I know it. I remember the first thing that was said to us, it was about 50 of us in a place bigger than this whole building. I'll never forget what this big sergeant came in there and said. And this is what he said. He said, "Gentlemen, welcome to the Republic of South Vietnam, where life has no value except to the one that owns it." And that's a hard one to swallow. He was right. I mean, it was the truth, but it's something you didn't need to know. And then when you end up in a combat situation, in my case, it was rather scary. It's something that you do get used to, but it was a wake-up call, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But I survived it, and there's a reason why I'm here. Whatever that reason is, I hope I fulfill it. And I did 13 and a half months over there, and when I came back home, they didn't recognize the Vietnam veteran as anything other than, I don't know how we weren't recognized. There was nothing there, And then when I started my professional career after that, and I took advantage of the GI Bill back to some education points, and I started taking courses in New York City down at Pace University by City Hall in Manhattan. And that was the first time I was ever in a classroom with more whites than me. It was like 3 of us in there.
Did serving in Vietnam with white soldiers change your view on race relations or race politics?
Yeah, I guess it may have. I just don't know. I looked at humans as humans, and I still do. If a person has their hang-ups, that's their problem. That's not mine. That's not my problem. I'm going to treat you the way I want to treat you. And that's the way it is.
So you go from being separate as a child to being around white people in the war, and then you said when you got out and you went to school, that was your first time in a classroom. Did you feel like you had to adapt? Did you feel like you had to?
Well, there was some adapting to do. Like, for instance, when I was taking the course, I had a professor, and there was 3 of us in the class, in blacks. I just realized that we weren't being called on.
Oh.
Yeah, we weren't being called on.
Which is new for you. Very new.
Which was very new.
Yes.
And after one class, I said to a couple of the guys, I said, "We got to speak up on this one, man. This guy acts like we're not even here."
Wow.
And we did. And I'm not going to call his name. I'm sure he's not living, but that's beside the point. And we brought it up to him,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, you know, I appreciate. He really appreciated it. Us saying it. He said, because we weren't the first ones to bring that to his attention.
Really?
He said he had other students bring that to his attention. I said, yeah, we're not. It's like we're not even here, you know, and it didn't change him.
It didn't change after that? Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I think he saw us occasionally, you know, whatever. But that didn't take away from the fact of what we were there to learn.
To learn, yeah.
Yeah, and so whatever he said, we were getting it anyway. You know, so that was his loss, not
Right.
ours. You know, he
Right.
didn't know what we knew, and I don't know whether it changed my mind or attitude. It taught. I was growing up.
Yeah.
I was growing up,
Yep.
so it was a learning experience.
Okay.
It was.
So let's talk about David Letterman. How did you get from finishing your education credits to being such a major part of the David Letterman experience?
That's an interesting question. I was working in Nashville after Vietnam
Okay.
for American Airlines. And airlines didn't pay much money. And back in those days, in the late 60s, early 70s, you had to be earning at least $13,000 a year to get a credit card.
Mm.
And I wasn't doing it. I had a corporate card, but you couldn't use it for personal use. So the credit card, so I wasn't making any money. I went on a job interview in New York, and down in Rockefeller Center with the Hertz Corporation. And this is back in the maybe early 70s. And security was not an issue in buildings. You could walk in and out of buildings like it's nothing. And I left the interview, going back to my hotel, and I'm walking down the corridor in 30 Rock, and I had to go to the bathroom, real bad. This is a true story. And I asked someone where the bathroom was, and they told me to go to the second floor and directed me to it. So I'm in there doing my business, and I hear this very distinguished voice behind me. How are you today, young man? Very distinguished looking man with his bow tie on and his broom and his dustpan. He was a janitor.
In a bow tie.
In a bow tie.
Wow.
And he said, and his name was Gene Sanders. I dedicate everything with my career to him.
Oh.
Okay? And we had a conversation, and he asked me where I was from, and blah, blah, blah. Then he said to me, he said, what brings you to NBC? I didn't even know I was at NBC. I had no clue. I had to go to the bathroom. And so we talked for a few minutes, and then he said, well, what are you doing? I told him I was going back to my hotel and back to Nashville. He said, I'd like to introduce you to some people. And he introduced me to this man named Peter Tintle, and eventually to a man named Lud Simmel, and I never will forget, and some other people. And that was the end of that. I left my resume, went back to Nashville, and thought I'd never hear from them again. You know, that's the end of that. But I did. I don't know. I don't even recall if I was even offered a job with Hertz. I don't think so. But eventually, after 2 or 3 interviews, they called me in and they offered me a job in the sales department. Now, I took the job and I'm making money. And at that time, the 3 major networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, that was it. Not like today. And there was another black guy on the staff. About a year or so, maybe less, a little less, into this sales job, myself and 2 other guys were called in, and the network wanted to go into the overnight business, and there was nothing on. NBC, for instance, at 12:30, when Johnny Carson, the Tonight Show would go off, nothing came on until 7 o'clock in the morning. And they wanted to sell time when nothing's on.
Right.
The intangible, can't see, touch, or smell, nothing's there. How do you sell that?
Right.
How do you get rid of that? So, you know, the person that was in charge, the president or vice president of the department, she called us in, and I think she made a mistake, in my opinion. Said, just get rid of it, of this stuff. And so we came up with the idea of giving it away for free, and for 6 weeks or something like that. And we put the proposals together with the legal department, and everybody else signed off on it. And the guy on Madison Avenue, one of the agents, said, he implied that they were setting me up to fail. I didn't see it quite that way, you know, but regardless of whether that was the case, that particular project worked out to a degree, to a large degree, and eventually everybody came on board. And I don't consider it being the pioneer thing, that was just a job. But prior to that, they were wondering where the money was because no money was coming in. And whose idea was this? And naturally, they pointed the fingers at me, even though it wasn't totally me. And she said, well, if you're that creative, maybe you should try production. And I said, oh, okay. And I knew people, producers, directors, and talent in that end of it. And so I took a lower paying job. I wasn't married, it was just me. I could take the risk. And I took the job, a lower paying job in the scheduling area where cameramen, makeup artists, wardrobe, stage directors, associate directors, stage managers, stage hands, everybody was scheduled. And these were egotistical people because they were making money, so it was a very, very hard job. You're dealing with personalities. And I took that job with the interest and intentions of eventually getting into production, and I saw that as an avenue of being able to get into studios and see what happens and observe what's happening. And my boss at the time, a man named Tom Smiley, he knew why I was doing this because other people were going that same path in order to get into different things. He wanted me to deal with audio, but no, I wanted to get into more the production and stage managing or whatever. And then they had a vacation relief program at NBC, and they said they hired me for the summer. And vacation relief was an opportunity to do all types of different jobs, okay? And it usually ran from maybe Memorial Day to Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And just so when people went on vacation, you fill in for them crazy hours. I was hired doing stage managing, but I had to join the Directors Guild, which is a good thing. And he told me, he said, now don't get comfortable because it's not going to last. You're going to get laid off. But I was hoping I would be able to go back into the scheduling, which actually happened. I went back into scheduling around November, so I had the opportunity to work the Macy's Parade that year. I went back, and then they called me back again and saying that, you know, we're going to put you back as temporary vacation relief. And the word is out around Durham and places that I'm working at NBC. But that's all I'm doing, is working at NBC. I don't have any big contacts or anything going on. And I'm walking down Fifth Avenue one day and going to work. And this guy, I don't know if you're familiar with him, his name is Ernie Barnes. He's passed away. He was an artist. He did all the background paintings for Good Times.
Oh, wow.
All those paintings in the background. And all those paintings are about Durham, Sugar Shack, Yabba Pool Room. That's all it's about. Okay. And he was having a show up on 57th Street someplace. And he wanted me to come. And I assumed, I don't know this to be a fact, but I was thinking that he's thinking maybe I could get him on the Today Show, you know. But I wasn't. You
didn't have any major contacts.
I mean, I knew the people, but I wasn't there. And so I went to the show, and I met some people, and I'm doing this vacation relief thing, and I'm getting ready to get laid off again. And I get a phone call. I don't know how the guy tracked me down. I really don't. We became friends after this. But he tracked me down, and he said to me, And it was Jimmy Walker, by the way.
Oh my goodness.
JJ.
From Good Times.
Yeah. And see, David Letterman, Jay Leno, and Byron Allen were writers for Jimmy Walker.
Oh my goodness, I never knew that.
Yeah, not for Good Times.
Right.
It's stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wow.
And he said that something like, this guy named David Letterman is going to get a summer replacement show at NBC in the morning, live from 9 to 10:30. So I met Dave. Yeah, I'd like to meet him. Yeah, sure. I don't even know if he remembers this. I mean, Letterman. Mm-hmm. But he said, listen, whatever happens, don't get comfortable with this because it's not going.
Everyone kept telling you the same thing. It's not going to last.
It's not going to last.
Just prepare.
Yeah, don't get comfortable.
Oh boy, if only they knew.
It didn't last.
I know, but look how far you went with David Letterman.
But that show did not last.
That show did not last.
No, it was canceled. It was canceled.
The relationship lasted.
Oh yeah, that show was canceled.
Yeah.
The morning show, after 6 months, and I think they kept him on retainer. You know, I hope I'm being accurate. I'm not. I'm close to it. Anyway, now I'm getting ready to go back into this scheduling thing again, and I get a call from my boss to come into the office, and it was another guy. Now, also on the morning show. Let me back up a second. Letterman, I don't know what they thought about me, but they must have thought something was funny. His girlfriend at the time, Meryl Marco, she was a producer, and I think she had something to do. I'm not sure. Anyway, when they said, here's David Letterman, instead of him coming out, he pushed me out there. I had no problem with that.
Right.
I went down there, but he came right out and pushed me out the way. So anyway, they started using me doing little skits and stupid stuff. So I had to join AFTRA. Now I'm in AFTRA.
Yes.
So
now you're in the union. Yeah.
Both of them.
Director and the union. Okay.
And AFTRA. And then SAG-AFTRA joined, merged together eventually. So they called me into the office, and there's a guy from the Directors Guild sitting there. And I'm saying, what in the world is this all about? And a boss says to me, he said, we got a permanent position for you. Faith and destiny, basically, we talk about.
Yeah.
And he said, we got a permanent position for you, a staff position. I said, ooh, this is great. And that was, and they asked a few words. And then as I'm getting up to leave, I know the fellow who discovered this thing. He was a staff guy. And so the guy from the guild, the Directors Guild, said, aren't you going to tell him why he's got a permanent position? Well, the agreement between NBC, CBS, and ABC at the time was that anyone that had a permanent assignment for 6 months had to be made a permanent employee. Now I'm in.
Right.
Eventually, time goes by, and Letterman comes back with the late night show at NBC, and I did that with him for 11 years. We did the show basically, I think, 4 days a week, 3 weeks a month, which left me with the opportunity to do all kinds of other stuff. I was doing Miss America, Miss everything, space shuttles, Super Bowls, you name it, all over the world. Everything's happening, money's being made, I'm married, my kids are coming along, you know. Everything's real cool. And then here comes this big button heads with Jay Leno and The Tonight Show, okay? And Letterman says, I'm out. And he goes to CBS, but he wants me to come, along with some other people that were working at NBC. I had reservation about it because of the fact that who knew if it was going to work?
Yeah.
Yeah, who knew if it was going to work? I got a job now. I got a permanent job. But they were making offers that you can't refuse. It was hard. And I wasn't going to go to California, and I didn't know what he was going to do it. Then he decided to do it at Ed Sullivan Theater. Things got better. Big shots at CBS had me come down there, and they said, yeah, you're coming, and they made, add some more icing on the cake. And we've been at NBC for 11 years, and then we did 22 years at CBS.
Yes, wow.
32 years all total. I was able to travel all over the place with Olympics and other things with the show. As a result of the show, I went to Bosnia twice, Afghanistan once, and Iraq twice, the USO, you know, support troops. and all that. Letterman went, and Paul Schaefer, you know, and we always got along. I mean, he's a very, very generous guy. I don't say that because I work for him. You know, I just say it because it's a fact. And he does a lot of charity stuff, and it's very generous.
Well, clearly he trusted you, which he should have, because you're a big part of all of his shows. He made sure that you were, but people enjoyed. I was one of the people.
Well, I appreciate that.
Who enjoyed all the skits and your funny personality and your
well, you know that
your
brings
commentary.
You know, like people would ask me that question a lot of times. That's just not only in the street, but other places. In interviews, they say, well, didn't that bother you? Weren't you nervous being on TV and all? I said, what is there to be concerned about when you don't know what you're doing?
And it seemed very natural for you, and you were funny. You were, you know, your claims, like, you just became his famous producer, one of our favorite parts, one of our favorite features from the Dave.
Well, you know, if it helped to make things work,
it definitely did.
And then I was on board. I had no problem with that.
I have to ask you, so the media industry is known for not always treating its black artists and producers fairly, and yet you were able to navigate the industry with much success.
Well, thank you.
Why do you think that is? Do you think you did something different? Do you think it was just
Gene Sanders?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Faith, destiny.
Faith and destiny.
I don't know, you know, but I know one thing. Yeah, I was there to do a job, make it work, and I wasn't kissing up to anybody or nothing like that. I can't honestly answer the question because, I mean, that's where I was pursuing it, and I wasn't going to burn any bridges. That's
an important lesson, though. One my father taught me: never burn bridges. But you said something about your childhood and your upbringing that I think is important too, which is that the entire time you were growing up, even though the community was separate but equal, that everyone that was around you held you to the highest standard.
Not only me.
Yep. And so I think that when we get into a professional work environment, those types of standards from our childhood kick in, you know? And I'm sure you always delivered.
They do.
I
mean, I could sit here all day and talk for hours about different experiences that you probably say, that's impossible. It didn't happen, but it did.
Yeah.
I mean, just different things that really, really happen. I mean, it's a blessing.
Have you ever Googled yourself?
For what?
I Googled you.
I know you did.
It's incredible. You're everywhere. You're everywhere. You got pictures with Kobe Bryant, who's my favorite basketball player of all time. You got pictures with Bruce Willis and Michael Strahan and Terry Garr. And like, how do you feel when you're out about in the community and you're a celebrity? How do you handle that?
I just have to deal with it. I mean, I can't get an attitude all the time. I mean, I was in a drugstore one day and I was ready because these kids working behind the counter were taking too long, and I'm ready. I was actually in there with Michael K. when he lived around here.
Yeah.
When he lived around here. And I don't know if they recognized him, but I'm ready to tell these kids to hurry up. I've got to go. And I turned around and somebody said, "Oh, hey, Biff." And I said, "Damn, I can't even get an attitude out here." I can't even get an attitude. So, you know, I mean, I don't know what to say, you know, but it's true. I mean, it's just, what was your question?
Is it hard to be a celebrity, like especially in a town like Greenburgh, which is not huge? You know, everybody kind of knows you.
I mean, I've gotten it other places.
Yeah.
But it lets you know that you're getting older, because most of the people are old to be saying, "Hey," that are speaking. Not a lot of the kids.
No, you might be aging. Your energy is very young.
Oh no! I'm talking about people who watch the show, who remember. You know, a lot of them. There's a lot of young people. You know, you mentioned Kobe Bryant and those guys. Every time I hear those names, stories come to mind.
Yeah.
I mean, like Michael Strahan. You know, we used to use him a lot when the Giants were doing very well and winning Super Bowls, and he was very good and very funny. And once he stopped playing professional football and started getting into television and stuff. And every time I'd see him, he said to me, he said, you know, it's not that I wasn't interested in this, but the reason is because of you, meaning me. I didn't look at it that way. I never thought. He said, you were the first one to put me on TV doing anything outside of a football field.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it. I mean, I didn't look at it that way. It was crazy. It was stupid. It's really wild, crazy stuff. And then, you know, you mentioned Kobe, God rest his soul.
Yeah. What is the one thing, maybe not story, what's the one piece of advice you would give to aspiring media professionals today? So we're coming up, like Michael Strahan said, you kind of inspired him.
Listen, the entertainment business, in my opinion, is only about two things. Temporary work and rejection. That's all it is. Nobody has a job. You know, they have projects. You might end up getting a job for a long period of time, but 9 times out of 10, it doesn't last. We got blessed with 30-something years. That's very, very rare. I think the show maybe still is the longest running late night show. I think Kimmel is catching up. He's close to 30, believe it or not.
Is he really?
I think he's close to about 30. So having said that, it's temporary work and rejection. I encourage everybody and anybody that wants to do this stuff to get to do it. If we're talking in front of the camera now, okay? But you know, there's no guarantee. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of. I know people with more talent out here, and people with talent that nobody will ever see because they can't handle that rejection. Yeah. It's tough.
So you need a thick skin.
Trust me.
Thank you so much for sharing everything you shared with us today and for being here.
You're more than welcome. I enjoyed it. I hope it works out for you.
Well, thank you. I got to spend this time with you, so it's already worked out. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on our next African Diaspora Experience.